Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Asia, where our goal is to empower and educate the women of our communities and the girls that they are raising. I am your host, Asia Nasir Shahid. Welcome, ladies.
Thank
Hey,
you. Hi.
thank you.
Well, we have another great episode for you today. As you know, in this entire month of March, it has been all about the wonderful women, the work that they're doing in Women's History Month. And so each week we have been showcasing here on this show a woman and the dreams that she has accomplished, the goals that she is, living, and the people that they're impacting. And tonight is no different. And so when we think about women in history and Women's History Month, the reason why we honor women is because they've usually left some type of legacy or they've impacted people in their community, their homes, their families, their workplace for generations to come. And so each of the beautiful ladies that you see here are all authors. They have written books, they have their literary work that is going to do the same and is already doing the same and impacting homes, communities, families for generations to come. And so I would like to introduce each of them. First, I would like to introduce Jessica. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about your work and the things that you do?
Sure, awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Asir, for having me here. And it's so great to be amongst such greatness and to have this conversation. My name is Jessica Janniere. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I am a wife. I am a mother of three young people. Amazing young people. I am a sister, a friend, an entrepreneur. My professional title is adversity expert. I am a author, which is one of my favorite titles because of the fact that, when you become an author, you create something that outlives you. And something that stays around long after you're gone. And so I'm really excited about just having this conversation about how being an author has changed my life. It has really moved me into my purpose. It has played a huge role in moving my professional career forward and helping me find my purpose to impact more people. And that really is what makes life fulfilling, and it's what makes life meaningful. And it's just something that I'm very, very passionate about. So thank you again for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. And now we have our next guest, Jannah Bayyan. Jannah, can you introduce yourself and the work that you do as well?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. So my name is Jannah Bayyan, mother of six. I always like to lead with that because it's really like a defining moment for me, like mother of six. Wife. I'm a teacher, author, entrepreneur. I wear a lot of different hats. I love to bake, all these different things. Much like what Jessica said, I started my journey in writing because I remember reading one of Shakespeare's plays, and he said something like, you write yourself in immortality. Like this is, one way that you become immortal. And I thought about legacy and thought about, well, what am I leaving behind? Like, what I wish that, my grandparents had left, things behind just so, we could have. So, my purpose is just really empowering mothers. A lot of times as mothers, we kind of lose ourselves. We lose, a part of ourselves when we don those roles. And so I really, endeavor to empower mothers and empower, women in general. I mean, you don't have to have given birth to be a mother. You're a nurturer first. You're a teacher first. So, I just really want to see women empowered. I think if we empower women, we improve the next generation of people. So, inshallah,
Wonderful, wonderful. We already got some hellos in the comments and everything. So people are definitely tuned into this conversation. The reason why I wanted to really capture, as you said, leaving, work that will, outlive us and, hopefully impact generations, people that we'll never see, people that we'll never meet. And I think that's the beauty of being an author. With the generation changing to technology and everything, being, on the computer, in your hands and smartphones, and people losing that love of reading again. What would you say to that in continuously writing books as a way for mothers and for women to empower themselves? What would you say to that as far as, people losing that love of reading?
Are you speaking to me?
Both of you, either one of you.
Oh, okay. Well, I know as a teacher, I see that firsthand, right? So I'm teaching middle school English, 7th and 8th grade, and I see that firsthand with a lot of the children. They do not want to read. They don't have the fervor. They don't have the stamina to really sit and read a whole book, from cover to cover. I mean, I don't know. When we were younger, the library was like a place. Like that was like an event for us to go to. So I definitely see that firsthand. I think at some point we will get back to that. You have to, because you can only go but so far before you start going in the opposite direction. So at some point we will get back to that. But right now, I honestly don't know what is in store for, this next generation of children who are growing up on technology.
Right.
Great points. And just to add to what you said, Jenna, is, a lot of it is mindset and perspective. A lot of young people, which is a demographic that I work with in the work that I do, work partnering with schools and different organizations. I'm currently mentoring young people through an organization called Girls Empowerment Through Mentoring Services. And one of the things that I've noticed, similar to you as an educator, is that the love of reading is not there. I remember being younger, and the environment that I was growing up in was very toxic, was very abusive, was very dark. And reading was an escape for me. And I loved it. It made me appreciate books because it was like I could get away from what I'm dealing with in my current circumstances by reading books. And it really helped me appreciate. And I really believe that a lot of it is exposure. It starts in the home. It starts with, are we developing and teaching young people what the benefits of reading are versus just say, hey, read a book and, books are reading is fundamental. Well, what does that mean? We throw out cliche terms and we give instruction, but we're not giving understanding to those instructions. We're not having hearts to say, hey, reading a book can help you minimize maybe depression. It can give you hope. It can change the way you view your circumstances, the way you view yourself. It can build bridges instead of walls between you and people who may not look like you. Books are powerful, and it really is about perspective. And I think until we have the conversation and we create environments like this one where we talk about it and we really put it into perspective of it's not just about reading is fundamental, reading is important, but why? How does it create a different type of life for us? How does it improve our life? How does it tie into the goals that we have and the purpose that maybe we're searching for, that we are endeavoring to live? Then we can start creating some curiosity and maybe some desire and some interest.
Yeah. I think that's you ladies made some really great points. Piggybacking off of what Jessica said and developing that love of reading, each of you are in a different genre of books. Jessica, you're in self-help, and Jenna, you're in children's book. And so with what we're talking about, which is developing that love of reading, I want to ask you, why did you choose, and what was your purpose in choosing children's book as it relates to developing that love of reading?
Well, as an educator, that's the first stop, right? So reading isn't everything. They say by the time a child is 2 years old, they can recognize, symbols. They know Dunkin' Donuts. They know McDonald's. They know. So this is a part of the reading process. Like they know, I remember a friend of mine, her daughter was like maybe like 4 years old, and she was like, I know how to spell applesauce. And we were like, okay, spell it. She was like MOTT. We were like, oh, my applesauce, right? So this right makes sense though, right? And this is reading. This is exactly what reading is. So reading is not just, okay, let me pick up a book and I'm curious. Let me pick up the book and read it. There's an acknowledgement that has to happen. There's a bell, a light that has to go off that says, you know what? I learn to read so I can read to learn. And that's really important. That's for any child, my children, my own children, the youngest child, it's like, okay, it's story time, it's bedtime. And like he gets in the bed, he pulls the covers up and he's ready for story time. It's the whole environment surrounding reading. It's not just the fact that I could be reading anything. It could be no words in it. It could be a coloring book. It could be nothing in it. It just pictures, and he's all for it because of the experience and what it's tied to.
Right. Now you make a great point about bedtime stories. I know for me, it was my father. My father, had a love of reading. He always read books. I always saw him reading books, which is why I love reading books now, because he always encouraged, read, read, read. And you just wrote a book and it's specific for bedtime stories. And my father used to tell me bedtime stories. Like I used to live for bedtime stories. So, give us that experience of what you can, share with parents as it relates to bedtime stories. You wrote a book specific to bedtime stories, right?
Right. So I wrote Good Night Night. I'll show it. Yeah. So, I have two sets of children, right? They're like split up by like 12 years, right? And so my first set of children, we did books and we did bedtime, but it was more so mommy's going to create the story for you guys. And they were like super into it. It was like, what story are you telling tonight? I'm like, it's about vampires, and it was like that was like the soundtrack to their childhood. And, it was just that bonding time and everything that, all the emotion and love that you pour into those stories. And I realized the importance, setting aside, the fact that I'm a teacher, we read, we have to, you realize the importance of the story. You realize the importance of story structure. You realize the importance of, teaching through stories. And this is something, as an African American, this is our history with the griots. This is a part of our history, teaching through those stories. So I taught a lot of what my children are today. I taught them a lot, related to morals, related to how to treat people, everything through stories. And so now, that bedtime story is just that bonding and that what Jessica mentioned earlier, creating that environment, that love of reading. And that is how you do that, I think, as a parent.
Wow, wonderful. I want to now turn the conversation to Jessica. Jessica, a lot of people see who you are. You're a motivational speaker. You're an author. You're inspiring. You're a mentor. You do all of these wonderful things. And your particular type of books are all motivational books, self-help books, and I don't think a lot of people know your story, and possibly your why for why you're so passionate about self-help and self-love. Could you share with the viewers, your journey and what made you, write the type of books and go into the industry of being a, motivational speaker?
Sure. Yeah. So my first book that I wrote, maybe about 6.5 years ago, is My Colored World. This is a memoir, but it does have a component of personal development and self-help. So what I did was, in this book, I took stories from my personal journals that I collected between the ages of 14 and my young adult years. So I had bins and bins of journals. And when I knew as a teenager that one day I would write a book, because my life was just so crazy that I was like, okay, nobody's ever going to believe this stuff happened. And I wanted to document it. And also, really, honestly, it was therapeutic. It was my escape, the way that I was able to cope with the negativity around me. But Maya Angelou said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story. There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story. And when I moved into my young adult years, and I started to move away from the environment that caused so much pain for me, I knew that I was on my way to overcoming. I was on my way to healing. I was on my way to searching for something that I didn't know what it was, but I knew what I did not want. And so the story, started in Germany. I was actually born on a farm in Germany, and I lived there the first 6 years of my life. At the time my mom was pregnant with me, she was looking for an abortion, and no one in the German town would perform the abortion. She didn't have the money to go to Holland, which was a neighboring area. And so I was born underweight. And because of her dire circumstances, she was homeless, she was in an abusive marriage. My grandparents raised me the first 6 years of my life. The interesting thing that happened was during those 6 years, she met an African-American soldier that was stationed in Germany. They got together, they had children, they got married, and Germany was not known to be friendly and to African-Americans, to people of color. And they were very racist, and they were very upset with her in this small town. And they basically chased them out and said, "You guys got to get the heck out of here." And so at 6 years old, she came back to get me from my grandparents' house and said, "We're moving to America." So here I am in this new family with my stepfather, my biracial siblings, and we come to America. And that's when it became very, very difficult. It really was culture shock. It was being moved from a safe environment to an unsafe and abusive environment. And my introduction to America really was not friendly. My stepfather's parents were very abusive to me. They were Black Southerners who were very upset that he married a white woman, and they were very abusive towards me. And there's a lot of different elements to the story, but you can imagine you're a 6-year-old child and you're being moved from a place of safety. This is in your formative years. And now you're being introduced to a world where race matters, and you had no introduction to that. And when it was introduced to you, it was where you became a target because of the way that you look, not understanding the social elements and aspects of American culture. And so I was bullied very, very heavily. I mean, I have mobs of kids chasing me home to the point where even if I go back to that community today, there are still people there that remember me, and they remember my face, and they say, "Weren't you that little white girl that used to get chased by them kids?" And I say, to this day, I could still go back to places in Rosedale or go back to places in Far Rockaway, and people would recognize me, that I was always fighting, that I was being chased, that I was being bullied. But I thank God that I'm here. I'm able to tell my story. So there was abuse outside of the home. There was abuse inside of the home. My stepfather was an alcoholic. There was domestic violence for 16 years. I'm a sexual assault survivor. The first time I was sexually assaulted, I was in the 4th grade. And then it happens again in the 5th grade. And then I was raped at the age of 15 by a neighbor and his cousin. And all of these things were things that I kept very quiet, that I didn't talk to anybody about, because I did not have any connections with my family in Germany, because my stepfather ensured that we had no phone at home. We were isolated from people in the community. He took our immigration papers, so we couldn't go anywhere.
Girl.
And it was just one thing after the other. So I say all that to say that books became my escape, my refuge, and writing became my escape, and became my therapy, became the thing that I needed to just express what was going on. And so being a 3-time suicide attempt survivor, I understand what it feels like to be hopeless, to be in a place where you question, well, why am I alive? Does God exist? What am I here for? Why would all these bad things happen to me? And so I began to really look back on my life and began to search for my purpose, to say, well, if I made it through all of these things, and I've just named a couple of them, but if I've made it through some of these things and I'm able to live beyond this, then there's got to be something greater for me to do. And so putting my story together, really was a labor of love. It was a way for me to show people that it doesn't matter how your story starts, but you have the power to control how it ends. And so I've been rewriting my story the last 17 years, in personal development, becoming aware, taking responsibility for my life, forgiving people that hurt me, forgiving people that mistreated me, that rejected me, that abused me, and recognizing that hurt people hurt people. And when I began to understand the psychology of human behavior and understand that when people project their pain onto you, it is a greater reflection of them, that it is not your fault, right? And so that was a really big part of my healing and a part of me moving forward. So this is why I'm very passionate about what I do. I have a sister that was murdered at the age of 15. And just quickly in wrapping this part up, when she was murdered, we came from the same environment. We were on the same streets. We were in the same place. And I said, well, God, why wasn't it me? Why was it her? And I said, well, God, if you allowed me to live beyond this, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that any young person I come in contact with, they're going to hear Vicky's story and they're going to know that they have a purpose and that they are capable of more than they could ever realize. And the things that happen to them in life, the traumas and the adversities and the obstacles don't define them. And so that is really what motivates me and inspires the work that I do with youth and our young people. So.
Wow, what a journey.
Wow.
You know, and I think that's the whole point of going behind the scenes. And I think we as humans, we always, you know, that's why they have shows like Behind the Scenes, Unsung, because we always want to know the backstory, right?
Right.
And so,
The why.
Exactly. And a lot of times, I mean, me and Jessica in the same line of work, and a lot of people look at us and think that the person that they see standing in front of them, this has always been our life.
Yeah.
And it's like, little do they know, behind the book, behind that story, there was a lot of pain and it was a lot of growth. There was a lot of evolving and transformation that happened. And we relate to people who have that. And that's why, you know, writing books, it's like we may not be able to speak to everybody, but if they can pick up that book and still be able to get that message, it's still so very important, you know? So I appreciate the work that you're, you know, the work that you're doing and the books that you're writing, because it's very inspirational. You know, Jannah, you write books, and I remember growing up, and this is just the reality of what it was. When I read books, you know, it was the Judy Blume books. You know, I gotta admit it, you know, I was a Judy Blume.
Yeah.
You know, it was the Judy Blume books and, you know, that type of books. And I never saw anyone in those books who looked like me. I never saw anyone who looked like me. And one of the things that I noticed about your book, even the book before Goodnight Night, you have another book, you know, and it specifically speaks to that. So I would love for you to talk about your journey. I don't know if it's similar to mine, looking for something that looks like me to be able to say, you know, they're telling my story. So I would love for you to share your journey and why you specifically made it a point to write the book that you wrote before Goodnight Night, which I have that book. And
yeah, it's My Brown Face is Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, So it's funny you asked that. I'm like, okay, she's not gonna ask about My Brown Face is Beautiful, because that's a whole.
Oh yes, I am.
Well, yeah. So,
oh yes, I am.
So listen, I like to say that some of what, you know, how I grew up was like, my mother shielded us from a lot. And, you know, in some ways that's good, but in some ways that's not good. Now, I'm the only child from my mother and my father. So I'm the only one, you know, who, you know, shares both parents. And then my mother was remarried. And for, you know, 13 years of my life, she was married to my stepfather, and they had 3 children. My stepfather, you know, he's a swirl, you know, he's a mix of a lot of different ethnicities. And so my sisters came out, you know, extremely light. I'm sorry if they are listening. I'm sorry, you know, but they did. They came out really light, you know, freckles, everything, you know, it was just really different. But my mother, like, that was never a thing. Like, there was never a point where my mother would be like, "Oh, Jenna, your brown skin is beautiful," or nor did I see any treatment different with me or my siblings. So I was like really ignorant. Right. And it wasn't until my step grandfather passed away and we were at a family's funeral. And my uncle said, "Jenna, you're beautiful, but not like your sister." And so I told him, and I'm older. I'm like, I think I already had like one child. And so I told my mother, and she was like, come to me. It
was like, let me fill you in.
Yeah, let me tell you what that is. And so it was like I lived my life in reverse. Like, I started to see things from our past that I wasn't aware of. And I'm just like, oh, other people are like super aware of this. And that, by the mercy of God, that was never my struggle. Like the skin color, that wasn't my struggle. But that was that, like, as Jessica said, people project their pain onto you. And that was clearly other people's struggles. That's actually the first thing people notice, when they see us together. It's like, oh, not the fact that, we actually do look alike. Actually, one of them actually looks more like my mother than any of us or anything like that. That's the first thing that they see. And I used to think that people, because I became aware of it, I used to think that people would think, and this is, in that growing up and you actually caring about, what people are thinking and what people are saying, as women, we go through these phases. And I for a little bit of time, I used to think that people actually thought that bothered me. And it was just like one day when I woke up and I'm just like, why am I like, this was never my struggle. I'm not going to take that struggle on. Like, that might be someone else's struggle. That is not my struggle. And I'm not going to own that. Like, that's not me. As a matter of fact, when I had my daughter, she's my only daughter. I have 6 children, 5 boys, 1 girl. And, I didn't allow people to take pictures because I kind of knew, my husband is swirly, and I kind of knew that, I was born, really light. My oldest son was born really light. And I kind of knew, I'm like, it's a strong possibility that, that's how she's going to be born. And I didn't allow people to take pictures. I'm like, nope, no picture. And like I would, you would see like the shoes, you would see like the back, but you wouldn't see the face.
Her face.
And it was just because I didn't want that hoopla around, what people's ailments are, what people were struggling with. And so I wrote the book, number one, as an educational tool for them, for my children, to let them know their heritage, is something that's really important. To know where you came from, to know who your grandparents are, something that's really important. But then at the same time, as an affirmation, like, it doesn't matter what, if you guys, have an opportunity to get the book, My Brown Face is Beautiful, you'll see that all of the children in the book are from different places, and not all of them have, visibly brown skin, but it's as a representation, it's an affirmation, like, yo, my skin is beautiful. It doesn't really matter what you see. This is what I see. And I know that whatever it is, it's beautiful. And so I really wrote that book, my journey with that, affirmations and just knowing myself and giving something to my children so that they know themselves. I just thought that was really important.
I think that, and I think that that's why it's so important for books and for us as parents to introduce these type of books to our children, because all of us know the rapper Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg has 2 sons. He actually has 3. He has 3 sons and he has a daughter. And his daughter, all of his sons are light, very light. But his daughter's beautifully, her melanin is just absolutely beautiful, but she's much darker than her mother and Snoop Dogg. Right. And she struggled so much with her skin because people would make comments like, you're beautiful for a dark girl.
Right.
So, which I'm like, okay, what, I don't know what that means. You're just beautiful. And so I think books like the one that you write, talking about my brown skin is beautiful, whether it's a darker complexion, lighter complexion, right, whatever it is, it's my brown skin is beautiful. I think it's books like that, as you mentioned, brings that affirmation, right. So whether it's you're writing a children's book and you're giving that affirmation, or whether you're writing a self-empowerment book like Jessica, you both are giving affirmation to some form of pain,
Right.
or
Absolutely.
struggle, that you may have went through, and you can relate to others who are doing the same. I know for me, I wrote a book as well, and in some of the, there was a particular chapter that was very personal, and when I wrote that chapter, I had to put the book down for a few years. Did that happen with you, Jessica, being that it was a memoir of your life? Were there moments where you actually had to put the book down because it was so heavy for you, and having to relive that and writing it and articulating it? Did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It did happen. It took me 2 years to actively and consistently write that memoir. When I made the decision that I was going to write it, first of all hell broke loose. Let's just say that. Listen, when you set out to accomplish a goal and you know that it's in alignment with your purpose, obstacles are going to come, and everything that can come at you is going to come at you. So I knew that I was on the right track because everything was just going crazy. So there were these moments where it was very emotional. It took me 2 hours before I started the writing process. Sometimes where I had to just pray and get my mind ready, get my emotions ready. There was some moments where I was writing, and all of a sudden a memory came back that I had suppressed. And there was this one particular situation where there's a chapter in my book called Big House, Big Pains. And I didn't realize that for many years, I never wanted to live in a big house, and I never had a desire to be a homeowner. I didn't correlate it with the fact that when we lived in a big house, that was where we experienced a lot of abuse. And I'm the oldest of 5 children. So you have to picture, you have an African-American stepfather, a white German mother, and then you have me, the white oldest child, and all of my 4 siblings are biracial. They're mixed black and white, and they identify as black. My sister, and I never refer to my siblings as half siblings. Like those
Me either.
My brother, those are my babies. Those are my boos. So my sister Vicky, she was the darkest in out of all of us. She looked like she was just a black girl. She was dark. She had very thick hair. And I just remember, like, her and I were very close. And I remember us living in a place called Grassmere Terrace. And there was a situation where my stepfather came home and he was drunk and he was pushing my mom in the room. And there was like these folding doors. And because I was the oldest, I was always the one that was very in tune to my siblings' emotions. I always had what I now understand is emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion. And I was always very protective of them. So I knew that it was time for me to take them in the room and play school, because that's what we did. I played teacher, and they were my students, and I would keep old books with unused work, and I would give it to them and give them stickers. But on this particular day, my stepfather pushed my mother into the room, and he was just hitting her. He threw her on the bed, and I knew that he was raping her. And I wanted to protect my siblings. And to be honest with you, I forgot about it for many years. And it wasn't until I was writing the memoir that memory came back, and I literally wept. I just wept. Like, I can't tell you how long I wept. I just know it was a long time. And I felt that pain for my mom. And, my mom and I went through a journey, because when you are a child abuse survivor and you witnessed your mom staying in an abusive relationship where not only she's being abused, but her children are being abused, her child, you lose respect for your mom. And I lost respect for my mom. And I hated her. I hated my stepfather. I knew that I never wanted to be like her. But you know what? God is a God of mercy and grace, and we have been able to restore our relationship. And my mother now is my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. She's one of my best friends and closest friends. But it took me forgiving her. It took me seeing her pain and recognizing that she was in an unfortunate situation where she felt trapped. She was an immigrant woman that came to another country. She trusted this man, and he did not hold up his end of the bargain. And so I began to really try to understand and empathize and just open my heart to what was really happening. I really began to start that healing process, not just for myself, but also the relationship between my mother and I. That was definitely one of those stories that came back to me, and it just hit me like out of left field.
Mm-hmm. Jannah, you've written several books aside from even children's book. You've written spiritual
Mm-hmm.
books,
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in the religion of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Has that ever happened to you where you've written a book about polygyny? You've written, different, what has been your journey? Have you ever
You
had
good.
moments where well, that's hey, I'm trying to get Oprah seat, yo.
All right. Listen, you got it. Listen. Yeah. So wow, the polygyny book. So I think that's up there too. Woo! So that was a journey, absolutely. Any book, I think the oldest art form is literature, writing, right? So if you think about, I mean, I'm sure they had pictures and everything, but expressing yourself and actually, that's an art form. And some people paint, some people create, different sculptures and things like that. And so for a writer, whatever other hat you wear, you are expressing yourself through that particular art form.
Absolutely.
So it's a part of your heart is going to go into it. So absolutely. As soon as I could be sitting, like there were times when, this is as a woman in polygyny. I married into polygyny 10 years ago, exactly, alhamdulillah. And
10 years, whoa,
10 years, yeah.
And Jannah, you and Jessica, you and your husband have been married how long?
April will be 19 years.
Woo!
Girl, and I've been married a whole 8 months.
Congratulations.
I'm proud.
Okay.
That's right.
Listen. If it's love match, it is
That's
what it
right.
is.
That's
you
right.
wait a lifetime for love, okay?
That's right. That's right. So you wrote a book about that, and did you have like the emotion that I wrote? I mean, I had to put the book down for years. Jessica mentioned that she had to do the same thing.
There were times because I mean the topic is so sensitive, right? So polygyny, it's like, people don't really understand that, right? So and this is something, it's not like we have like handbooks on this. It's not like you can go to someone in the community and say, hey, what do I do here? So I kind of like, trekked that alone. That was alone. And all I had was, those examples from the Prophet Muhammad and, his wives. And that's all I had. But alhamdulillah, I think, having the background in that English background, that ELA background, and, being able to transfer a lot of that analytical, capability over into, Islam, I was able to like kind of like extract my experience from their stories, right? These stories are antiquated. They're like years and years old, but I was able to see myself and everyone. Like, I know exactly why she did that, right? I know exactly why she reacted like that. Like one of my favorite stories is when they were sitting eating, Prophet Muhammad was sitting eating with his wife, right? And then they were sitting conversing, and then one of the maidservants brought in, a plate of food from his other wife, and the one who was there like hit the plate of food and like broke the dish.
Like, are you kidding me?
Right. And the Prophet just picked up the dish and took one of his wives' dish and was like, a dish for a dish, right? And I just like I see myself so like I know exactly why she hit that dish. No, it wasn't against the food. No, she didn't hate the woman at the time.
It was just how dare you.
So yeah, she knew what the other one was doing. How dare you feed him? Or so it was moments like that where I'm just like, you know what? I'm not crazy. I'm okay. Like I'm okay, and it really helped propel me through that, and I would recommend to anybody, like if you are literary, if you are whatever, write your story. Even if, I just learned about the brain dump, like just sit down and dump everything that's on your mind, like, because that is power. That gives you, it's empowering. It really is.
It is. And that's what this whole show is all about. It's about educating and empowering. And that's why I asked you to be on the show, because you've done the work. And that's, I think, the hardest part for so many people. It's wanting to be, transformed. They're wanting to evolve. But the work that comes with that is that's not easy work. That's probably the hardest work that you'll ever do and not get paid for, right?
Right.
The reward comes from living a different life and living your truth and living, being free and being at peace. That's the reward. That's the payoff. But it's a lot of work. So in writing the different books that you've written, that it really took from you on the inside. Did any of you receive any backlash for some of the, what you wrote? And talk about why you were still so persistent in saying, in spite of the backlash. I'm going to start with Jessica. What was your motivation to say, look, in spite of the backlash that I'm getting, this book is going to come out?
Yeah, so I didn't get any direct backlash. I think that because of the relationships that I have with people, and I also believe people knew the sincerity of my heart. So like when I was putting the memoir together, I had a family meeting. The first person I sat down with was my husband. And I was like, listen, I believe God has called me to share my story, to be truthful in it, to be transparent. It is painful for me to share some of these things, but I knew that it was a calling. It was part of my purpose. And I knew that once he gave me the blessing, that I had that covering and that I had that blessing that I needed. Then I spoke with my children. They were younger at the time, but I let them know, listen, mommy's becoming an author and I'm going to be sharing some personal things with the world. But I believe that God is going to use it to inspire people and to save lives. Then I sat down with my mom and my siblings, and I asked them, for permission to, if I asked them, did you want me to change your name? Most of the people in my book, their names have been changed. My immediate family gave me permission to keep their names. And so I really appreciated that. And it really encouraged me. There were some people who I knew. First of all, there were a lot of people from my past who knew me for many years and had never known my story. And, we all judge a book by its cover. See, I think you mentioned this earlier, that people see us. And, I'm not one to go around moping around and, oh, woe is me, victim this. I don't have that attitude or mentality, and I don't share my story. And for many years, I didn't share my story with people in my circle. Unless it was intentional or unless it was purposeful and I felt like I could trust the person. So there were many people who were very shocked and they were like, Jessica, I knew you all these years, and never knew. And how did you survive? And you're so strong and you're so resilient. And then there were people, and I'll say this here, there were people who, they start acting a little funny. Some people get a little distant and I'm an energy person. I pick up people's energy
real quick.
Right. And I can tell when people did a switch up on me. And it's okay because I recognize that people come into our lives for reasons and for seasons. Everybody can't go with us where we're going to that next level. And so I knew that I had done my part. And there's no greater reward than when people come up to you or people email you, people hit you up on social media and say, listen, I'm in Trinidad or I'm in Africa or I'm in some part of Europe, and they say, listen, I read your story and your story spoke to me. Your story kept me from committing suicide. Your story helped me initiate a conversation with my mom, who I hadn't spoken to in years. We just never know the impact of our stories. And those are the people that reach out. We can imagine how many people don't reach out and, don't share how our stories have impacted them. So yeah, that I would say that would be, what my experience was in terms of, I didn't get any direct backlash. Thank God. Thank God. But people were acting a little funny with me, you know.
It's that passive aggressive type of backlash.
Keep it moving.
Yeah.
It's okay.
The judgy eyes, you know, the judgy eyes. People looking at you like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Jenna? Did you have some backlash writing any of your stories? You know, My Brown Face is Beautiful. You know, the polygyny book. Did you have any, you know, backlash from that?
I can't say that there was like direct backlash, but I can say that in writing the polygyny book, it was the feeling, like, you know, you guys talked about energy, and so, you know, there were a few people, and the questions and, you know, the thoughts you get from the questions are kind of like, well, who are you to write this book? You know, and so that was, you know, a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, but it was very specific people. And so, like Jessica said, you know, it was like, all right, you know what? My husband done signed off on this. My mother is cool. My family is cool. They know about it. And so I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep pushing. And so I think, you know, the devil, you know, he knows his soldiers, right? And so he'll pick a person to kind of whisper to them. And then, you know, he's working through them. But once you get past that level, it's like you look at them and you're like, I see you. Like, I see the devil working through you. Right. And I like, you don't even have to acknowledge it. You don't even have, like, it's not even a factor anymore. You just keep pushing, keep moving towards your goal.
Wow, beautiful. I'm just so enjoying listening to both of you. I share some, you know, as an author, I share very much some of the same, you know, feelings, sentiments that you're saying. My next question to both of you, and I'll start with Jessica and then Jenna. What was your why? You know, all of us, you know, and I know in our, you know, with us, it's all about intention. What is your intention behind why you're doing something? You know, and being where it's personal, knowing that people are going to have an inside scoop and be able to pass judgment, even though you're speaking from the heart. You're talking from a place of, you know, sincerity, and some people may not take it that way. What was your why, Jessica, in writing the books that you've written, and what was your why, Jenna, in continuously to write the books that you've written?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. My why was what hurt me. And what was hurting me was the fact that I did not really fully understand in the beginning, when I first started writing, what my purpose was. I honestly felt that I was just here. And then I remember, like, I went through a lot of different phases in my spiritual walk. Like, I went through atheism, I went through dabbling in witchcraft. I've looked in, I've done a little bit of everything. I was into Buddhism, you know, just really, really searching for my purpose.
Find your way.
Trying to find my way. I was in Kingdom Hall, and I even had a Quran. You know, I was reading the Quran for a while, and I was into Ouija boards, and I mean, you just name it.
You went from one spectrum to the next, girl.
All over the place. And
she said, I'm gonna find this.
I was like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And so originally, I didn't understand, because what happens is our lives are like pieces of puzzles that we really don't see coming together in this mosaic until we get to a certain place where we intentionally look back and identify certain markers in our lives, markers that transitioned us, markers that changed us, markers that made us really deeply reflect. So I came to that place and I realized, like, okay, I've really been a searcher my whole life. I've been a searcher, searching for meaning, searching for purpose, searching for healing, searching for fulfillment and for impact. I've always had a desire to be of service. I've always loved people. I've always loved people from all different walks of life. Anybody that knows me, even when I was younger, I had Jewish friends and Muslim, like you, I just love people, and I love people's stories, you know? And so that's how I ended up coming up with the title, My Colored World, because I had all of these different colorful experiences. So what happened was when I was at that point where I knew it was time to write the book, I had just come to Christianity. I had just had an encounter with God, and I had accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And I was on this new spiritual journey. And all of a sudden I felt this press and I felt this call to write this book. And so it became more of now an act of obedience. And I'm sure in your faith, there's moments in your life where you have to make a decision and you have this crisis of belief where God is calling you to something, and it is a crisis of belief. And that is what happened for me. It was like, okay, I'm not just going to write this book just with these journals, but now it's a book that shows God's grace. It's a book that really points back to the fact that in all of my darkness, God was present and he was preparing me for something greater. And so it was an expression of obedience. It was because I wanted to impact people and inspire people and give them hope. And it was because I wanted to keep my sister's story alive, which was the reason why I wrote the second book. So if you notice, the second book actually took stories out of the first book, and I created it in the language of today's youth, young people. So this was written for teens, and I dedicated this book in memory of my sister. And so I've had the privilege and the honor of partnering with educators and schools and youth programs to ensure that young people have the tools that they need to move beyond adversity and have those coping skills when life gets difficult. So that is really what my why is. And it's been an interesting journey, to say the least.
Yes. Well, I've seen the journey. I mean, me and Jessica actually grew up in the same neighborhood. So for the viewers that are watching, we grew up in Far Rockaway, Queens. I lived in Ocean Village on 50, and you lived at what street? Like,
I lived all up and down. I lived in Grassmere Terrace. I lived in the bungalows in the mid 80s. That was during the height of the crack epidemic. Okay, so you can imagine. Wow. I lived in the 70s. I used to hang out in O. We actually had an ex that used to live in Ocean Village.
Right. So that's where I lived in Far Rockaway. I lived in Ocean Village, or they called it OV. And now all this time, I don't. Now both of us, my birth name is Jessica. Here's Jessica, but we never met each other.
Right.
I actually met Jessica when I just converted to Islam.
I remember
maybe just a few months earlier, and it was my very first speaking engagement as a Muslima. And I met Jessica, and it was on domestic violence. And I was speaking from the perspective of, being a Muslim woman and the stereotypes that come with that. And that was the first time, and let me tell you, me and Jessica brought the Jessica and the Far Rock to the
Jessica squared.
You know what I'm saying? I was like, yes. So that was the first, and that was about 6 years ago. That was the first time that I met.
Longer than that. Was it? I think it might have been longer than that.
Well, I took my Shahada 6 years ago, so it had to be somewhere around that time frame. And so I've seen the journey from then to even now. So I want to ask the same question to Jannah. Like, what is your why? Like, you've written different books. The last 2 books were for children, specifically for children. And then the other one was for specific to women in Islam who practice polygyny or maybe thinking about it. What was your why? And most recently, I think your children's books have been very personal in your evolution as a mom. So what's your why?
Well, I mean, you just said it. I don't want to, it might be cliche, but just that motherhood. I think as a mother, that role. I mean, I love my husband. I love all of my family. I love my profession. I love everything that I do, but that role is really sacred to me. That is a sacred role, and we owe it. I owe it to my children to constantly grow. And if the one thing that I teach my students, one thing that I teach my children, I teach I try to teach them is, find your talent and then, develop that and use that and grow from that, find your why, what makes you go. And I can't teach that if I'm not living that, right? So trying to be that best example for my children, and trying to show them, how to constantly evolve, because life is about evolution. Life is about going through those different phases and arriving at your best self. And that you might do that several times. You might do that, you might have an awakening 10 years from now. You might, you constantly evolve. And so that sacred bond that I, have with the art of motherhood, I covet that, I protect that. And that's really my why. So if I'm faced with anything, my kids are gonna know. My son is like, "Are you writing another book?" If they see me in front of the computer, they're like, "Are you writing another book, Ma? You're gonna write a book about raising a teenager, because right now that's one of my challenges right now, right? Raising a teenager."
Yeah, we saw that live the other day.
Right. Right. So that that's one of those challenges right now. So the kids are like, "Are you gonna write a book about teenagers? Are you gonna?" And I want them to know that, not so they can follow in my footsteps, but so they can create their own path, and they don't have to be afraid, and they can evolve into their best selves, and know that, where you are today is not where you're going to be 5 years from now. What you do today does not have to define what you do 10 years from now. You have an opportunity to, grow and change and evolve
without an apology.
That's
without any, you don't owe anybody anything. Like this is your world. I remember, I know, we're about to wrap it up, but I just want to tell a little story. I was like in my second to last year of school. And so we were doing, a lot of things on child psychology and everything. So one of my professors, she was like, she asked the class a question. She was like, what do you do if you're in the bank and, your children are jumping on like one of the chairs in the bank? And so, a lot of the people are like, I tell my child to get down, come stand next to me. Like, don't do that. And she's like, but you notice that when you go to the bank, there's always a parent in there who allows their child to do that.
Right.
Right. There's always a parent in there. Right. And so she said, psychologically, when you stop the child, no, come stand next to me, you can't do that, or you shame them for, exploring, you stop that process. And I'm not saying that it's okay to let them run wild or anything like that. Right. But at the same time, where do we reinforce that exploration? Where do we reinforce that this is your world too, and you can discover it too? Like, as long as I provide that safety net for you, right, that, which is what my role is, to help provide that safety net. When do we allow them to explore and discover themselves? When they become adults, or is that something that is developed throughout, childhood? And so, that's really, my driving force in everything that I do.
Ladies,
that was beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just listening to you, and that's why I love doing this talk show, because I get to learn so much from listening, and it allows me to reflect, in what I'm doing, and it empowers me. And so, ladies, I thank you so much for sharing your stories.
What
I would love to do is make sure that the viewers know, the moms out there, the women who are, maybe not feeling good about themselves, maybe they do have an untold story that is paining them, and it's those secrets that really hold us back from growing. I've been there, and I continue to tell my truth. And so, I know that journey, and being a mom, I know that journey. We're all mothers here, so we know that journey. For those that want to, obtain your books, to be able to, learn more about you, where can they find you, Jessica, and the work that you're doing, the empowering work that you're doing with youth, your books? Where can they find your book, and any handles of your social media pages, so they can follow you and continue to see, upcoming events and things that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, awesome. Well, I would love to connect with anybody. I am on all social media handles except Twitter. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. My name is spelled exactly as you see it here on the screen on the bottom of my photo. And I have a website, same thing as my name, jessicajanniere.com. And I respond if you send me a message. I love to connect with people. My book can be found on my website if you want it autographed, personalized. Otherwise, it is also available on Amazon.
Wonderful, wonderful. You ladies, men, whoever, because I know there's some men watching.
Right?
And, and that's okay. And that's okay because they have daughters and they have wives and they have moms. So let them watch because the more they're educated, the better that they can be for their the women in their lives. So if you're listening and you think that you need that empowerment, please make sure that you're following Jessica. And Jannah, where can they find you? What are your handles on social media? And where can they find your books?
So right now, you can find the book at theprettymother.com. And it's not, it's really meant to be an empowering thing for all women. Like, if you're a mom, you are living your best life. You are your best self. You are beautiful. You are pretty. So theprettymother.com, same The Pretty Mama on Instagram. And if you are looking for a community, and if you're a Muslim and you're looking for a community or you're interested about a community, please join our community, Rawda Masjid, RAWDAH Masjid MASJID.com. We are doing amazing things, and you won't see a lot of it on social media, but trust me, we are this week we probably have 5 events going on this week that is not even making it to social media, but it's
happening.
Amazing. So yeah, it's happening. So come on if you're looking for a community, please.
Thank you, ladies, so much for a wonderful show. I just want to if you have just one comment for the viewers, just what's one last thought that you would like to say, Jessica and Jannah? What's one last comment that you would like to leave for the viewers that are listening and heard your story, your journeys and your triumphs, your successes, all of that? What's one last comment you have to say to them?
Well, my last comment would be, I live by the motto, which is the name of my organization, Look Up and Beyond. And that is a lifestyle that I've embodied. And I have found it to be helpful. I found it to be encouraging and inspiring. When we look up and beyond, we are looking to our faith. We're looking to a vision that tells us and reminds us that where we are today is not where we will be forever.
Right.
But we have to take personal responsibility. We're going to have to look in the mirror and we have to become self-aware. And as Asia, you said earlier, we got to be willing to put in the work. And I've worked on myself the last 17 years, and I will always be a work in progress. I don't believe I will ever arrive until I get to heaven. And so the encouragement that I have for anyone is that if you want to change your life, the greatest change we can make is the change we make within ourselves.
Absolutely.
It starts with our mindset. It starts with our perspective. It starts with our behaviors and what we are contributing. And so be encouraged and create that vision. Ask God for your vision and just keep looking up and beyond and let that be the driving force that keeps you moving forward.
Wonderful, wonderful final comment. And Jannah?
I would just say, you are raising the future. So give that work. You're not going to get anything without sacrifice, and you have to put in that work, and you don't get to pick what the sacrifice is going to be. That's part of the divine decree, So you have to be receptive. You have to be like water. One of my favorite movies, Memoirs of a Geisha, right? And they looked at her eyes and she, oh no, I just love it. Right? So, and they looked at her eyes and they say, you're like water. And so from that, you bend, right? You don't stop. You're not like a rock. You're not, nothing can get through. You bend with whatever you have going on. And so you have to find your way. And as a mother, sometimes we can get lost. We can get lost and finding that our way and maintaining our own, identity and, not sacrificing everything. You can't pour from an empty cup. So definitely, you are raising the future.
Jannah, you're doing amazing work, right? Jannah, that whole
no, you guys
investing in children. Jannah, as you were talking, I thought about how as mothers, our children should be the inspiration to helping us finding ourselves, not losing ourselves. We should never get lost in motherhood, right?
Absolutely.
Our children should be the inspiration to find ourselves.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely.
I'm telling you, I'm gonna replay this because y'all sisters was dropping gems, y'all was dropping hashtags, y'all was
No, I
y'all was
see
dropping
you with
posts.
them questions. You're good. You got it,
Yeah,
girl.
you got them questions. Very good questions.
Oh,
Listen,
I
we could be here for another couple hours because this is
Right.
great.
tell you,
You
I'm
got
telling
it. You
you,
got it. Jessica,
this,
I'm grateful to be sharing this platform with you. Like your story
Likewise.
is very inspiring. I
yes.
heard you speak before, and every time I'm like, I don't know if you guys saw, but you're gonna replay it. And there was one point where I was just like
I saw
cleaning
you,
it.
Jenna. I saw you.
Yeah, just really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you, ladies, for a great episode of Conversations with Asia. Continue to do the work. I'm here, and this is what it's about. Empowerment is allowing other people to shine in your world and not feel compromised. Is being able to learn and to grow and to teach and be taught. All of those things. And this show allows everyone, the viewers, myself, and the guests, to be able to embrace all of those facets of being on the show. So thank you, ladies, for bringing that tonight. It was just a beautiful evening of inspiration and motivation.
Thank you
Viewers,
for
if
having me.
you know of women just like this, please contact me at jessicacares.org. Let us know. It's all about spotlighting women who are really making a difference in our community and for the girls that they are raising. It's so important for us to show that, because what we don't know, we can't learn from. If you know of a special
Mhm.
person that you think should be on the show, please reach out to me at the email that I left earlier. Also, next week, stay tuned. Next Saturday, we have a very special guest. She is a childhood friend who has talk about a story of triumph, from tragedy. It's going to be next week. It's a story that is really going to tug at your heart. So I encourage everyone to join us next week for that show. It's next Saturday, right here again. So thank you, everyone, for joining us again for another episode. Good night, ladies, and enjoy the rest of
Good
your night.
night.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.